Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Shed the Shame podcast, folks. I am your co-host, Alex Kovalfrakes, the founder and CEO of the Agenda Period app, alongside Aljalyn, the CEO and founder of Ladybox. And today we are joined by Marie Mills, the founder and owner of Clear Solutions. She helps small business owners document their standard operating procedures so they can run more efficiently. Marie, we typically do a cycle check-in and wanting to acknowledge that you are 4 years past your last period. So I'm curious if you have any idea where you would be in your cycle if you still had one, if you have any idea of like some fluctuations or anything that would still be going on.
That is a really great question because when I had my periods, I remember I really did. I fluctuated mentally, emotionally, physically throughout the month.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I was a very, very heavy bleeder. So it was really inconvenient and it really was present when I did have my period. And when a lot of women would talk about not wanting their period, I actually liked the kind of going with the flow of the cycles. And I'm fairly intuitive to begin with. And I would like my intuition would really ramp up at certain parts of my cycle. And I really did like that. And until you asked me that, I actually forgot that used to happen. And so it's less obvious. I probably still do cycle through in some way, but it's so much less obvious because the physical element isn't there.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I maybe you'll pay attention for a couple of cycles and get back to us with your field research. It'd be interesting to see. Yeah, I am checking in just at the kind of last day of my period and getting into the follicular phase. So as a lifelong extrovert, I have to work pretty hard to not push the gas too hard when I go from my period back into the follicular phase. So I am working on reining in the energy today. So that is where I am checking in. Aljalyn, what's coming up for you with your cycle check-in today?
So we're just staying on course with the I don't know because I have an IUD and a few things changed over the summer that probably impacted it. So I don't know, and I'm okay with that. I used to be able to know where I was, but yeah, I don't know. I am impacted today by the weather for sure. It's gloomy here in the Seattle area. And so I am like moving a little slower than I like to, but perhaps that could be contributed to potential luteal phase. Who knows? But yeah, I don't know, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, wherever you are at with your cycle is great. Good idea to kind of pay attention so that you can get the support no matter what is going on. So thanks for playing along, Marie. That's why we like to start off with the cycle check-in. And I'm super excited to jump into this conversation with you today. So thanks for being here.
Yeah. Marie, when you shared that you had heavy periods, I just related to that so much because I've had very heavy periods where I once even bled through 2 overnight pads within 2 hours. And I was at a career fair trying to recruit talent for our company. And so being in the middle of that was, embarrassing for me to have to change twice and not have access to anything else. And so just hoping I didn't bleed through any of my clothes while I'm like at this 6-hour-long career fair. And so I appreciate that you share that openly in your email with us, but I would love for listeners to learn more about what that was like for you and then, growing up, and then even what it was like for you in your career, how you navigated through that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it actually took me a while to realize that I was an exceptionally heavy bleeder. And I would go to the doctor and I'd say, is this normal? And they'd say, yeah, some women are like that. And then I learned to say, I go through 40 tampons every cycle. Is that normal? And they're like, oh, that's a lot. Right. And so it took me a while to realize it's okay. Everybody's different. Most women don't bleed this much. And I have met other women who are heavy bleeders. And as soon as you say it, they're like, oh, I get it. But if you're not, they just don't get it. Like I've known women who go through 5 tampons, 4 tampons in a cycle. It's inconceivable to me. And so it was something that really had to be managed a lot, like, or thought ahead of time. Like always had to have tampons in every purse, in the car, everywhere you go. And I remember having more corporate jobs before I had my own business, where there would be back-to-back meetings. And at some point in my cycle, I eventually would be like, okay, I have to make the decision to either go back to my desk to get my purse to get more tampons, which is in one direction, or go to the next meeting and get there on time, which is in the other direction, and get there and then be so distracted because I don't know if I'm going to bleed through during the meeting, or I go get my tampon and now I'm going to be late to the meeting, and then people can't figure out, like, why is she late? What is her problem? And just something that is like ever present in your mind. And I never felt, oh, this is awful. I mean, this is just the way I was. This is just the way I was. It was more like, wow, this is really inconvenient, really a problem, and not everybody gets it.
That sounds, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that sounds anxiety producing.
So much anxiety.
So like, I'm curious of like, what did that do to your mental health in the workplace while you were going through your period month after month after month?
It is very anxiety producing because you're trying to focus. And it's this thing, it's like having something there all the time, like speaking to you and like trying to get your attention, because you can't lose track of time. You have to monitor things. There's only certain time, like breaks between meetings. You have to be ahead of the game. And I would tell you, I worked at one company, Puget Sound Energy. I worked there for a little while. They had in every women's bathroom baskets of tampons and pads. And I'd never seen that before. I was like, oh my
I love that.
It was amazing. And I just thought, after that, I thought, yes, of course. Why doesn't every company have that? Because then that solves the problem. All you have to do is find a bathroom. You don't have to be like running back to your desk. But it was just, wow, it was just one of the ways. It was a great company in a lot of ways. And that was one thing that made me feel just like, wow, I'm important. And they're going to help me take care of this thing. And it's,
yeah, menstruation matters, and you felt, like you mattered in that moment. I love that so much. Did you ever have to do the seat check when you got up from your seat?
All the time.
Yeah.
I'm only going to wear black pants. I have to check. Yeah,
that was me. Like when I would bleed so heavy, it was like, and then it's like, how do I go clean if I accidentally did bleed through too? It's like, how do I do that discreetly? Yeah, it's a lot of anxiety for sure. Did you, when you were going through that, did you feel like you could connect with a lot of other menstruators, and like, were you able to give each other tips? And if so, like, what were some of those tips that you were able to share with each other?
Yeah, I think most of the women I knew were not heavy bleeders, and they just didn't understand. It was inconceivable to them. And I, at some point in every cycle, I would peak, and it would just like, we're really going to flow heavy. And there'd be like 1 hour where I would have to change my tampon every 20 minutes. So it could be very, it's awkward, because even if you're meeting with a woman, you're like, oh, excuse me, well, wait a minute, didn't you just go? What are you doing here? And so there's always this feeling you're almost presenting two faces, right? Because there's you have to take care of this, but you can't really talk about the fact that you have to take care of it. And so there's like this dual personality thing going on. And not very much fun. It is awkward. It's just darn awkward. I think I love this show because you're talking openly about it, and there needs to be more talking about it.
Yeah, I remember being at a conference one time in Seattle, in San Diego with a coworker, and we were out to eat dinner, and I remember saying like, oh, I need to go pick up some pads. I feel cramping, and so I want to make sure I have any, because I didn't bring any with me. Mm-hmm. And I felt even like a little embarrassed having her come with me, even though she like has periods, and have her come with me and see the kind of pads that I had to get, which were like the overnight ones. And she just like, she was so kind, and she was like one of the few other women of color that like I've worked with before. And so I don't know if it was that kind of camaraderie, or she just like was nice and understood, but she didn't like give me a judgmental look like I was scared she was going to. And so I'm curious, like for you, if you, whenever you had to go pick up your period products, did you ever have that anxiety too?
Yeah, I think it was, the actual just picking them up. I just had to always plan ahead. I'm a good planner. So I'm like, I was never going to get caught short. But I do remember like once meeting up with, it was a kind of a work related thing, but we were meeting at a different location, and we got there and the location was not yet open. So we had to wait outside, and I could feel that I had to get to the bathroom. Like I was starting to flood. And so I just sat down and I told the other woman there, I said, I can't move until that door is unlocked. Because once I move, I got to get right into the bathroom. And she was so kind. And she was like, oh, I get it. And she kind of like, just kind of watched me, I think, and just like was there to support me until the door got unlocked. It's so funny, talking about these, you just get through the event, you get through that situation, but you don't really think about how many times you've had to manage your period just in the day-to-day life, how much it can affect you. Yeah,
it's like getting me actually really choked up, like just having gone through my period and having the privilege of now working for myself, but also remembering all of those moments, like feeling like a gush of really warm liquid, and you're like, oh shit, it's too late. Like, what do I do now? And just like knowing the disaster that's going to be waiting for you when you can make it to a bathroom, or like the sneezing or feeling like something, you're like, oh God, did it go one way or the other? Do I have enough material here? And it's just heartbreaking, really, to think about. Like, we spend on average 8 years of our life menstruating. And so that's a lot of, obviously not every single moment of every single bleed is wrapped up in this, but that's a lot of time. And it just feels very visceral in my body of like, I've had so many of those experiences myself, and it's just really hard. Something that's so natural and normal should not be this challenging for people to talk about and think about. So thank you for, again, sharing with us. I'm curious if there was any, besides your great planning ability and thinking through all of your strategies and exits, was there anything that was really good or supportive at work? And then on the flip side, something that you wished would be better beyond that one organization that had the product provided for you?
Yeah, I cannot think of a single workplace when I was not working for myself that was really supportive in that way. I think it's just, so that's a few years back, right? I mean, because it's 4 years since I've had my period. So I think we are more enlightened now. We're talking about things more. But I think back then it's like, no, it just was like having my business now. And when I've had my business, when I've been menstruating, it's like, wow, this is really nice. I don't have to, like, if I'm working at home, I don't have to worry about it. It's really a relief. Yeah. And I think just having the products available, I think that's hard for some people to understand, that you either have those or you don't. And when you don't, it's and just having them available is a small thing that can help every menstruating woman.
Yeah, when you don't, you attempt the toilet paper pad and like wish for the best. And that, I think every woman I know has had to do, woman or menstruator has had to do that, found themselves caught unaware. And you're like, well, how quickly can I roll this one ply toilet paper around itself? And
exactly.
Yeah. And for heavy bleeders, like, forget about it. Like,
it's going to last 5 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a story about, so I've done a lot of backpacking and hiking, and that's a time where, like, even if, you're not going to menstruate, you better have some. And I went on a out of state canyoneering trip, and I started early. Now there was another woman on the trip that started her period, and I don't know if that knocked my body into starting the period or if that's just kind of a myth, but there I was with like 2 tampons at the beginning of the trip with beginning of my period. I was in big, big trouble. And I was trying to explain to the group, which is men and women, like how this is going to be a problem. And they like couldn't get it. And I was so stressed out. And we camped one night and we heard this noise and walked over to the hill we were camped on, looked down, and there was like an outdoor group, like a teenage outdoor group. They were out doing an outing and there was all these young girls. And I said, oh my gosh, that's it. And I ran down and I went and I said, I have my period and I'm running out tampons. And every woman, like every young girl gave me all their tampons and it got me through just barely. And I thought, my God, if they hadn't been there.
I want to cry. I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
And I mean, I was on alert, like nobody in my group could get it. The other women on the group were very, very light bleeders. And the minute I realized I was starting my period, it's like, I got to figure out a solution. I got to figure out a solution.
Yeah.
And then in comes this group of young women. I'm like, I'm saved.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
That is a really, I think we've talked about this on other episodes, but I have never not come across someone who is willing to give me a supply if they had one and I asked for it, or same for me. Even if it's someone I like didn't like, I would be like, oh my God, here's a tampon, here's whatever I have, like if they need one, because we have this like shared painful and kind of embarrassing experience.
Yeah.
So a question that comes up for me too, sorry, Algernon, but that cups weren't really available. Would something like that have been supportive during the time of really heavy bleeding had those been more accessible? Or did you ever try anything like that? Did that work?
Yeah, I was afraid to try it because I thought it just felt like I bleed so much. I wasn't sure how that was going to work without just getting it all over myself. So I just stuck with what was kind of tried and true for me. Yeah. Yeah. But the outdoor thing has this extra problem of then you have all the waste that you have to pack out as well, which is, it gets big and messy, but doable.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, you have talked about how you've been able to help others in the work that you do, kind of like remove or shed their own shame with helping them with like processes and organization, and even goes deeper than that too. And so I'd love to hear from you, like how you've been able to help others in shedding shame.
Yeah. So in my business, I'm helping other business owners document their operations and their processes, their procedures, so that they can delegate and they can train easier and not worry so much if an employee leaves, that the employees can leave with all the information of how to do the work. And what I find is interesting is a lot of my clients are women. The majority of my clients are women. And when I start working with them, and these are like smart, successful business owners. And then there'll always be this point kind of at the beginning where I start to look at their processes. I look at what they have written down, or I start listening to what they have. And you could just see the discomfort come up. And I think, so I'm always like, oh, it's fine. This is very normal. Like if you had this all buttoned up, you wouldn't hire me. Right. So we're here to just sort it out together. But I think what's behind that is this shame of not being perfect. It's like there is this expectation that if you run a business, you should be perfect. If you're successful, you should be perfect. And there's like, right, that's nonsense, right? You, as a business owner, you tend to be very entrepreneurial. You're going to figure things out. You're going to, be somewhat of a risk taker. And perfection, well, you're going to get better as you go, but that you don't need to be perfect. You need to be able to figure out if something went wrong, like why did it go wrong? And then you just move forward. But I think it's very deep in our culture for women to be expected to be more perfect and for business owners to be expected to be more perfect. And so part of the work I do is just really like, hey, we got to like not worry about that and not have that expectation, because it really is nonsense.
So what I learned from a client a few years back, they weren't one of my favorite clients, but this was like one of my favorite phrases that they would always say is, I need to know what the CPR is. And it's so good when it comes to like organizations running a business and processes, because what CPR stands for is consistent, predictable, and repeatable. And to be able to have that is to help your company stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like that you essentially come in, and it's not like you're resuscitating and the business is dying, but you are providing a lifeline to businesses with something that is CPR, consistent, predictable, repeatable, so that their company can, keep going and thrive and even scale. So, and I love that you do it very judgment free, and like, you're there for a reason, just like, pads, tampons, cups, discs are there for a reason. They were made for a reason. And yeah, there's a solution for everything.
There's the tools. They're the tools that you need to get the job done. Absolutely. Yeah.
So we have a couple more questions, but I would love to ask you, what brings you comfort, Marie?
So what brings me comfort? I think it's knowing that I have the tools to figure things out. Maybe I don't have all the answers immediately, but I have resources and, whether it be friendships or colleagues or whatever tools that I need to just take care of myself and whatever job is at hand. I think that brings me comfort.
I love that. That's so good. I think the last question we'll end on today is, if someone's listening and they are still in the middle of that corporate world, they're not working for themselves, and they are dealing with a heavy period, what is something that you wish you would have known back then that could maybe give comfort or guidance or solace to someone else kind of swimming through those waters right now?
Yeah, I think just to know, like, you can feel kind of alone when you're like that. And I think just knowing that there are other people out there, other women out there that are, if you're a really heavy bleeder and you're at work and you're trying to get through this meeting, just try to visualize there's probably 1,000 other women going through the same thing, and you are not alone. And if you can see the humor, like, to me, like, I can get through a lot of dark stuff by humor, which might be kind of quirky, and other people might not see it funny, but like, wouldn't it be hilarious if I just bled over everybody right now in this meeting? Like, the joke's on them. So I think, like, whatever you can do to kind of lighten the heaviness that you might, of that burden that you might be feeling, that there's other women out there feeling like what you're feeling. And
I kind of wish everybody could hear Alex and I laughing when you were saying that, Marie.
I actually want that as like a graphic novel for like empowerment. and just like what? I just envisioned this like tidal wave, this crimson wave, just wiping everyone out of the meeting. And,
who did it? Excellent. Was it the actress that plays Khaleesi in Game of Thrones? Didn't she like come out with like a graphic novel for periods?
She does have a period she goes and fights crime, and her power is her menstrual cycle.
Yeah, so like now we gotta connect her with Marie. like I have that connection, but anyway, the new volume. Well, thank you so much, Marie, for being our guest today.
Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners and supporters of the Shed the Shame podcast and the campaign. To learn more about Marie, please visit her website, www.clearsolutionsbymarie.com, and you spell Marie, M-A-R-I-E. And if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, please email us at podcast@shedtheshame.co. And to learn more about the fundraising campaign, visit the website, shedtheshame.co. And until next time, let's keep these conversations real and messy, just like periods.
Thanks, everybody.